All right, well, as people continue to trickle in, we will just go over some of the basic stuff and just get going. So, welcome everyone to today's discussion all about data migration to Oracle Fusion Cloud. I'm Stephanie, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion alongside Dennis Peter, our US More for App Sales Manager. So, we're thrilled to have you all here, and we're especially excited to welcome our three panelists who will get to introduce themselves a little bit shortly. So, before we dive in, let's just go over how this session will work. Panel discussions are relatively more seamless in person, but we are in a virtual format, so there may be some quirks. So just thank you in advance for your patience as we navigate this new format together. But here's what to expect. So we'll be discussing the different phases of data migration to Fusion Cloud, pre-migration, during migration, and post-migration. So we already have some great questions, so thank you for those. But we still encourage you to submit any additional questions in the Q&A section down below or in the chat. I will do my best to scan them all. And you do that throughout the session, anything pops up. But please keep them focused towards data migration, cleansing, integrity, Fusion Cloud, FBDI, all that sort of good stuff. And if your question is directed to one of our panelists, just please mention their name. We'll do our best to cover as many questions as possible, but if we don't get to all of them here, we will make sure to follow up with them afterwards. And this session is just all about learning from real world experiences. So instead of hearing from us at More for Apps, you'll actually be gaining valuable insights from your industry peers who have successfully navigated their move to Fusion Cloud. So if you got any questions that you want answers and anything you want to know, this is your opportunity to ask it. So go for it. So now let's introduce our panelists. So we're lucky to have three professionals who each bring unique perspectives on their migration journeys. So we have Denese Campos from Jack in the Box, Derek Bradford from ATCO, and Kara Hart from the Williams companies. So we will let each of them introduce themselves and mention a little bit more about their background, their role in the organization, when they migrated to cloud, and the ERP system that they transitioned from. And then after they introduce themselves, we will get going. So Denese, would you like to go first?
I would love to. Thank you, Steph. I've been in the Oracle space for probably close to 27 years now. I started my career at a company doing accounting, and they went to Oracle, and I loved it. I just started working on Oracle and transitioned to IT department. And that was a long time ago. And I've done multiple implementations with Oracle from EBS, and now we're on Fusion. We've gone on Fusion since last April. I've been with Jack in the Box for about 15 years. I started here when they were upgrading from 11i to 12. Spent quite a bit of time on release 12 on-prem, and now we're on Fusion. I'm one of their lead systems analysts here. I have a partner that does more on the development side, and I'm mostly focused on application support and just keeping Fusion up and running and happy.
Derek, would you like to go?
Sure, yeah. My name's Derek Bradford. I'm Manager of Financial Systems Optimization at ATCO. I've been with ATCO for 36 years, so I've been involved with systems pretty much that whole time. So we first went to Oracle EBS back in 2001. So we moved from an in-house system to EBS. And then we're through different implementations of EBS. Our last version was the R12 version. And then in 2018 is when we moved to the cloud. So almost 7 years now that we've been in the cloud.
All right, Kara?
I'm Kara Hart, Williams, which is a Fortune 500 energy company. And we moved to R12 from R12 to the cloud almost 4 years ago. And I've worked on the Oracle support and implementation team for over 20 years. Started with 10.7, 11i, R12. And recently I have moved into the accounting department. I'm working on process improvements and automations.
All right, awesome. All right, so let's get started. So let's get going on what was going on before migration. So the decision for migration had already been made. Now you have to figure out what you're going to do and how to prepare for this process. So this question will be for everyone here. So what data cleansing efforts were made before migrating to the new ERP? So were there third-party tools used? Were there any development or manual effort involved? This is for everybody, so whoever wants to go first.
Sure. So yeah, so we did a lot of cleanup before we went to the cloud. So we had been in EBS for a long time, and through operating, we had a lot of things kind of just hang out in the system. Old suppliers that weren't being used anymore, customers that were not used, but things that we hadn't actually cleaned up in the system. They were just kind of there. So we did go through an exercise to get the system as clean as we could. So closing old projects, end dating suppliers and customers, and the tools that we used to do that, actually, we had more for apps at the time. So that was really the tool that we used to do that. So it was really kind of quick and easy to identify those types of data that we had out there and get that cleaned up before, because the more we could clean up in the old system, the less we would have to convert into the new system. And I think that was really kind of the biggest effort of going to the new system, was that data conversion. So it was nice to get that cleaned up as clean as possible before we did the actual move.
I would say we did something very similar to Derek. With our old system, we also had more for apps. But one of the things we learned going to Fusion Cloud was that we weren't going to bring over any history. It was open purchase orders, open invoices, current suppliers. So we really had to focus on what is their most important data that we're bringing over, and close things that were hanging out there. We tended to have purchase orders that were still open that we needed to close. And it was very similar to what Derek was saying, in that it's like that data cleanup prior to migration is key, because Oracle's saying, no, you can't bring over any history.
Denise, how did you guys prioritize data that you decided to bring over, or was there a
well, it was really just, for suppliers, for example, we looked at suppliers that maybe some suppliers we only use annually. So we looked back a year at their activity. We know our current suppliers, we have invoices almost daily for them, but then we have suppliers that we only use annually. Maybe it's for our 1099 tax preparation, for example. We only use them maybe once a year, because we send off our 1099 information and they prepare the documents and send them out. So we had to go and look back for at least a year, if not a little bit more, to see when activity was, and do an analysis that way.
Got it. Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kara?
And ours was very similar, but we did bring over all master data that had been used within 18 months. So we could pick up anything with annual contracts or 1099, just what she was saying. We also sent our data, our master data, to Peachtree, which was the third-party software that would do the scrubbing of the addresses and get them standardized, so we could put them into the cloud in good condition. We loaded banks, all the US banks, which were over 17,000 banks and branches. And then we mapped our data to make sure that we had clean data on that too. And then for AP and AR transactions, they looked at anything that was open. On the AR side, they looked to see if they could write anything off or prepare it for conversion. On the AP, we paid out everything that was due at the time of conversion. And so all open invoices that were on some type of hold or something, they were canceled in the old system and then re-entered manually in the new. And we did not have more for apps at the time, which would have been a great benefit.
Okay.
Yeah. And similar to what Kara mentioned, for our AP, we paid as much AP as we could, even if it was paid ahead of the due dates, just to try and limit the amount of open AP that we had to bring across.
Did anybody use implementation partners during the process? And did they take care of any of the data cleansing, or was this completely put onto the company?
We had an implementation partner, and they did not do the cleansing. We did the cleansing ourselves.
Same with us. I mean, they recommended the approach and what was industry standard at the time for doing a Fusion implementation, but no, all the data cleansing was on us.
Yeah, same for us. They provided some guidelines, but we knew our data the best, so we were we're doing the cleansing.
Hey, Denise, I have a question for you. I'm pretty sure this one's for you. Please clarify whether the restriction on historical data was a business decision or restricted by Oracle.
It was Oracle. They didn't, bringing over anything closed. Like we went back and forth about, for example, we went live in April. So we were wanting to bring over our, January 1 through April 24th invoice history and payment history so that when we did run 1099 at the end of the year, we wouldn't have to merge them from two separate systems. And we were told, no, I don't want to say we can't do that. It was highly recommended that we didn't do that because I think really it had a lot more to do with having to then convert payments, right? We weren't bringing over payment history. So bringing over paid invoices, we wouldn't have then, when they were paid. So it's just, I think it's more implementation standard to only bring over current data than you can't do it. And maybe a time and money too.
And then another one, how did you handle year end then?
So for 1099 reporting, like I said, we had to merge data from the two systems. So we still have EBS up and running. They pulled the data out. We do use a third party preparer. So we just sent them the data and they merged it. For financial reporting at year end, we brought over 5 years of history in our GL. And then the same thing for EPM. We use EPM for financial reporting. That also has 5 years of history.
Yeah, so we did something similar at the GL level. We brought over 2 years of history so we could do the current plus prior reporting. But we did have that history, just like balances, but we did have that history on the GL side.
Another question
Yeah,
for you guys.
I was going
Go
to say,
ahead.
I just saw in the chat that somebody who went live on February 2nd did bring over history. So that's nice. I mean, it was only, a month. So maybe that would have been the deciding factor. But yeah, we had a lot of pushback from our implementation partners on not bringing over history.
Yeah, I think
Wait, back to oh, go ahead. You go ahead. There's other questions in here. So, but you go ahead.
And part of the history for us as well was just trying to balance your subledgers to your GL. So we're bringing over GL balances at the time, but if we're also bringing transactional kind of data into the subledgers and we need to account those to the GL, you end up kind of duplicating some of the costs in your GL. So there was kind of that decision as well that we're going to leave the history in the old system, the detailed history in the old system, and we'll just go from this point forward to bring the new stuff, knowing that we're bringing in the detail or the balances at the GL level.
Right.
That was the same for us.
We've got a whole bunch of questions here, but here's this one. Were there any challenges mapping EBS master data to Fusion? Any lessons learned there? The mapping.
So we did for sure because we changed our chart of accounts as well. So we added a couple of segments into our chart of accounts at the GL level. So there was a big mapping exercise to get from our old chart of accounts GL strings to the new one. So that was a lot of work up front to get that mapping done. And also from project accounting, from that perspective, we also changed our task structure in our project accounting world. So instead of trying to map like task to task into the new world, because there really wasn't a good mapping that way, we did create just conversion tasks in projects in the new world. So we could bring over project balances into the new world, but just into a conversion task and using conversion expenditure type so that we could control the accounting on those type of transactions. So in some cases, we did a map like one-to-one to try and get into the new format that we created. And in some cases, we just created like almost like a dummy task to hold the conversion amount. So at least we could get our balances into the new system.
Okay. Denise, Kara?
Yeah, I mean,
Anything?
I feel like for us, we did, inventory items, we did projects, our project structure stayed the same. Those were fairly seamless. But we did also add a segment to our chart of accounts. So the consideration there was less for a mapping perspective, just because it was just an add for intercompany. They have some new features for intercompany that we took advantage of in Fusion. But what for us, with changing the chart of accounts, that meant we had to make sure that all of our integrations also looked to that new chart of account structure. So we had to go through, we have probably 127 plus integrations that we have. A lot of them do touch on our chart of accounts. We had to go through every single one of them. And that, as well as our interfacing systems, some on-house, some not, that all of those had to change too, to adopt that new chart of accounts.
Got it. Okay.
We actually reduced our co-combination by 2 segments and then changed the sizing of one of ours. So we did have mapping for our accounting. For master data, we kept the same supplier and customer numbers. We kept the same, I think we kept the same purchasing purchase order numbers. We only converted over open PO lines and quantities, so we could keep those going. We did have new project numbers set up in a new format, so we would know those were new. We had a big change on projects as because we were using PowerPlan at the time for our projects and assets. So that came into Oracle. So there was big conversions and mapping on that.
Okay. Excellent. Well, we'll probably get into in the future, in how this affected the once you went live. So yeah.
The other complexity we had at during implementation is we had purchased maybe a year before the Del Taco brand. So we were also integrating Great Plains as well as EBS into Fusion. So we had a whole separate team of consultants working on that integration as well and doing the mapping. So that's something to consider if you have multiple systems you're now integrating into Fusion.
Got it. Twice the work.
It was quite the project.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And one thing Kara mentioned as well for our project conversion was very similar. We did come up with a new project numbering scheme in the new system, but we did convert the old project numbers with their values. And that was helpful to the users as well. There were kind of some comfort around those old project numbers that they knew what they were. But going forward, everything was numbered under the new format.
New system. Okay.
All right. Great. I'm going to move on to the during migration aspect. We still have got a lot of questions in here, and hopefully we can touch on those at the end as well. So please, ask questions. So now we're in the migration process. You may be hitting some kinks or it's going smoothly. I don't know. Hey. So for everybody again, what was the process for handling exceptions and errors during migration?
Yeah, so we did. So one thing when we went live back in 2018, we had to use other tools for the migration of the data because More for Apps didn't have cloud products back then. So we did use the Oracle FPDIs. There's some web services available in Oracle that you can kind of use to download and upload things. But there's a bit of a mix of things that we used. But it was just trying to stay on top of the data, do it kind of a piece at a time to know that you're balanced. One of the things we did with our project accounting. So we're very heavily capital project focused. So we converted our WIP balance at the GL level into like not our true WIP account, but like a conversion WIP account. And then when we converted our WIP balance into our projects, we created the accounting so that it was just, the accounting would take the dollars out of the conversion account and put the dollars into the real WIP account. So we could tell when we did the conversion into PA, if that conversion account had been cleared out, we put the balance in to begin with, and then we credited it out when we put the charge into the projects. Then we knew we were balanced from a WIP perspective. So we did try and use some kind of conversion accounts in some cases where we could kind of monitor the balance that we were expecting to be converted into subledgers. And then when that was clean, then we would know that we were good.
Okay. Thank you, Derek. Denise?
All
Kara?
of our converted data was done using FBDI. It was set up by our implementation partner. We did have some issues with the way projects was converted and ended up using More for Apps to reclass things, move them around. Our user community was very proficient in using More for Apps, so it was seamless for them to go to the cloud tools and to make those adjustments after the fact.
Okay. Was there consideration, since you've used the FBDIs, of running that instead once you got to the business teams?
I think once they realized that data wasn't where they wanted it to be, the project accounting team just felt more comfortable using Morpher apps instead of having to learn the FBDI tool. They were, they had done some testing with it during user acceptance testing, but didn't enjoy the experience.
Okay.
And it was a bit cumbersome for them. And they thought, well, we're experts at using Morpher apps, so we would just use that tool instead.
Got it. Okay. Kara?
Yes,
Same
we
question?
used FBDI templates to convert our master data and our open AR transactions and receipts. We had some web service to convert some of the other module data. So how did we handle the exceptions? It was mostly handled by the IT team. So we were doing it on weekends or after hours. And because we were familiar with the data, as we would encounter those errors, we would, and the SMEs had to be on call during that time. So we could contact them and say, what was expected here? Here's our error. The FBDI errors are very cumbersome to go through. So we wish we would have had Morpher apps to help with that, but that's how we handled it.
Okay. Awesome.
And then the thing we found is just order of operations is also very important. Like you need to convert your suppliers before you convert your POs. You need to convert your customers before you try and convert your AR invoices, those kind of things.
Okay. I imagine that stays the same in any implementation, or was there something different with cloud that required that to be more of a priority?
No, I think that's pretty, yeah, just to make sure that we've got that in the right order.
Okay. Excellent. Steph, other questions?
Yeah. Were there any disruptions to business operations during migration? How much downtime was required? Where was there friction during the migration? And that could be it for anybody. Derek?
Yeah. So we had a blackout of about a week to 10 days when we were going through the conversion, just so we weren't creating new data in the old system. So we did have a bit of a blackout. So we went live on October 1st. So until October 10th or so, we had people kind of out of the system. We still needed to do things like issue inventory. They were just kind of tracking that on the side of the desk so that we could enter it into Oracle after the fact. And people holding on to their time cards and things until we were open. But we did try and have that bit of a blackout where we get that clean cutover before we started creating new data.
Blackout out of the EBS system, Derek?
Yeah, and the new system. Yes,
And new
exactly.
system.
So yeah, stop creating transactions, the old one, so we'd have that cutover of what we wanted to convert. And then while we are getting things set up in the new system, we had them out. So there was, they weren't in a system for that period of time.
Got it. Okay.
We were quite similar to that. I don't think we were blackout for that long. I mean, we started like on a Friday evening, so we had the weekend. And then the plan was to be completely blacked out of both systems until the first Wednesday when we had to pay, critical suppliers that we needed to pay. So that was the first thing that we brought up were, AP so that we could pay our suppliers. Some of our suppliers actually do a direct debit, like our food vendors. They don't want to wait for their money to supplier restaurants. But yeah, it was the same. We had a good, 3 or 4 days of production downtime in both systems.
Okay.
Ours was a little more unique. We have different closing schedules based on modules. So AP closes first, which is the last work day of the month. So after they closed, we went down for a long weekend. So we had 3 business days off, and it was over July 4th weekend. So we had 3 days of, holiday and weekend. So we converted master data during that time. We had already converted some of the master data before that, but we had to do delta loads, and we converted, let me think of what else we convert. Well, it doesn't matter. Project information, purchase order information during that time. So that whenever it came back up, AP would start in the new month, which was July. And then the following week is when AR closed. And so we went down for that weekend and we did the conversion of Delta customers invoices and receipts using FBDI. Then we were back up again starting on Monday, and then GL balances, the final balances were brought over during the next weekend because we're just on that kind of rolling cycle. And then we were done after GL was finished. We were done in the old system.
Okay, so you did it in a couple of
It's
different
rolling
phases.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Was there a time for, and this for any of your three? Was there times where you had to maintain data in both systems, and how long was that? Or
No,
We
ours
did,
was a clean
yeah.
clean
Clean
cutover.
cutover?
Like,
Same
yeah.
with us, yeah.
Ours was both systems until it was finally cut off. Yes.
because you did the phases probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, we did have our, I think like Kara kind of mentioned, we did have our go live on October 1st, but we did have the other system with the new system open as of September, so we could start some of that master data conversion that didn't need to wait. So yeah, we did have some stuff already converted, kind of waiting for us for go live.
Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
we did that as well. And then we just had Delta conversions once we actually started the complete conversion. So like the master data, like you were saying, like items, suppliers.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, I have a few questions. I think someone did ask, like, did you convert all at once or a segregated approach? I think you guys talked about that, but this is from earlier. What was the approach followed in bringing the employees and or user accounts to have access to Oracle Cloud Finance? I'm not sure. How's your approach? Do you see that, Dennis, if you want to bring up the Q&A too, you can open that. What was the approach followed in bringing employees or user accounts to have access to Cloud Finance?
So yeah, like for us, employee data was kind of part of the conversion data. So we did
Yeah.
have to create the employees in the new system.
Mhm.
We kept their employee numbers as part of the conversion. But we did have to set them up with access to the new system. And that was one of the things that we've kind of learned with as we've gone with the security roles in Oracle, is that all the advice we're getting is that you don't want to stay with the seeded roles in Oracle, the seeded security roles. They tend to give too much access. You'll have accounts payable clerks who can open and close periods just because they've got those privileges in those seeded roles. So that was one thing, maybe just a heads up that you'll want to take some time to create those custom security roles to make sure you're only giving your users access to what they need. And there's quite a bit of work around that. But that was part of the employee conversion as well, to make sure that they had the right roles in the system.
Okay. Denise, Kara, did you guys experience that a little bit too with the seated roles versus the customized roles?
Oh yeah, everything's customized because like he said, Derek said, there's just way too much access. And I had some lessons learned on roles this week where we made a change and I had a user test that change and everything looked fine because their subsequent roles had privileges that I thought were still in the role that we changed. But when somebody that only had that role went to go use it, then they were missing stuff. So you need to be very careful about the way the roles are created and how they're intermingled with other roles. It's different than EBS where you would choose your, you change your hat and you choose your responsibility and whatever you chose is the only thing you have access to. In Fusion, you just log in and whatever role you have access to and those underlying privileges are all available to you in one dashboard. So it's complicated. But to answer the original question about employees, we don't use Oracle HR. We have two HR systems, one for Del Taco and one for Jack in the Box that we integrated. And we loaded our employees just from data that we received from the two HR systems. And then the licensing is different the way in Fusion. So we used to create everybody with a base role. Like everybody would get like an employee role that had access to self-service expense. So iExpense in the old system. Now, and even for people who never used it. So we would auto create the employee user account, grant them access to expense, whether they used it or not. Now we don't do that. We auto create the employee user account, but we don't grant it any roles because that would be it. It's a cost to us that we didn't incur in the old system.
Got it.
But yeah,
Okay.
you have to create all of your new roles. There's no migration with employee roles and responsibilities. You can use, there is a spreadsheet upload for that. So whatever you have set up in your test system, you can then export and import into production.
Okay. What was the biggest during the migration when in respects to data management? Like, what was the biggest struggle that you guys ran into? Anybody, all three don't have to answer, but if anybody wants to take that one.
Can you be a little more specific,
Yeah.
Dennis?
Yeah, just getting the
Yes.
data from one system to the next, and then obviously going live with the business teams. There's obviously some fallout that happens in every implementation I've been involved in. What did you guys find moving to the cloud? What was the biggest area or surprise, I guess, for the business teams?
Well, back to the HR, we had a lot of struggles with our HR. Just convert, we're only converting employee data. So employee, supervisor, cost center, and then banking information. So for direct deposit, for expense reports. The APIs, I think one of our systems uses SOAP, one uses REST, and it was just a struggle. It's like we could never seem to get really good data from HR coming through. And we were constantly battling with our other providers, right? Because both of our HR systems are cloud-based. We've got to log tickets for support. They're just not always quick to turn around. So if you have other cloud systems that you're integrating, I would say start early with setting up those meetings, setting up your request to them for how are they going to send files over? How are you going to do your connection points? Get that going as soon as possible because it can take a significant amount of time.
Okay.
All right. I think let's get onto our post-migration stuff. I still have a whole bunch of questions in here that we will try to get at the end, but we're just gonna keep this moving along a little bit. So now everyone is migrated. All right, with it comes some headaches of getting used to new software, adapting processes, and making sure to keep your data up to date and managed properly. So for everyone again, in terms of data entry and data maintenance, what was different from your old ERP and Fusion Cloud? How did the tools and the processes differ for better or worse?
Yeah, for us, EBS was really highly customized for us. I think that's probably true for a lot of people. They've got a really highly customized version of EBS. When we went to cloud, we took out all of the extensions. We just went with the out-of-the-box kind of cloud setup. So all the extensions that our users had kind of relied on in the past were gone. So we had to create workarounds for them or change our processes in certain cases. But it was difficult for the users because we would go to a brand new system and it almost seemed like a step backwards for them at the beginning because all the things that the other system had been customized to do, the new system wasn't able to do that. So, and at the time we went live, we didn't have the tools like More for Apps, didn't have cloud products at that time yet. So we were in a bit of a definitely a transition area where it was difficult for the users to get into the new system, to get used to the new system. But part of that was our change management. So we did, I think change management is an important part of that as well, because the system does change from EBS to the cloud. It completely different look and feel, and some of your processes may change if you don't have the extensions in. So that was key for us to make sure we had that change management and training before we went live, making sure we reached out to all the groups and had several training sessions for all the end users before they saw the new system in production. They were all used to it. We did a lot of training for all the users beforehand.
Got it. Okay. Denise?
Yeah, I can look at it from both perspectives, from like the finance perspective and the IT perspective. Speaking strictly from an IT perspective, with a cloud solution, you don't have access to the database. You can't just, I'll just create a table and I'll use that data in my customization. No, you don't have that anymore. It's difficult to even just get data out of the database. There are some products out there where you can actually query your Oracle database, but Oracle doesn't make it easy for you. we use a third-party tool called SQL Connect from Splash BI, which makes it easy for us to do just basic SQL queries against a database, especially when you're writing, a custom BI report. So from that perspective, finding these tools like a Morphoapps or a Splash BI that enables you to get access to your data quickly was key for us. And it's key for us supporting the application now that we're, 11 months in, 10 months in, something like that. From a finance perspective, they're still doing things manually that we used to have automated in the old system. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't get to customize it as highly as we could in EBS. It's the cloud, so you are locked at making customizations, and we have to find new ways to do it, whether it's an Apex form or some other extension that we're not there yet.
Okay. All right. And the users, how do they adapt to the new system from a day-to-day perspective with the data?
It's a lot slower. I mean, I know we've had to add temporary staff in accounts payable to keep up with the demands, even though we do the majority of our transactions are all paperless. I mean, we're pretty much paperless here, whether it's from invoices coming in or, our payments going out. We do very little on paper, but still it's different and it's challenging. And, we've had to increase staff. Having the tools like Morphoapps that is a lot easier for them to navigate than the FBDI has made it critical for them processing invoices that don't come in electronically, or maybe we just get a spreadsheet. And the same with our accounts receivable. In the very beginning, there was a key field in the Morphoapps template that it wasn't available to us. The turnaround from support to get that added was pretty quick, within a month or two, but it was a change in development. So it took some time, and we had to use FBDI to load invoices. And it was a challenge. It took me hours to, try to create a template, get it to load properly, have all the fields, have it all upload successfully. Like, it took many, many iterations of going through the process, and it was quite challenging.
Quite the process, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, I
Yeah.
have a question more about that,
Okay.
though. It's just after go live, what were some of the biggest complaints that business teams had around FBDI, ADFDI tools? Were they sufficient? Could you elaborate more on the pitfalls and gaps? So
Kara,
Too
you
much.
wanna-
maybe you touch point about that.
Yeah, too many columns. Like, we're still having issues. Like,
Yeah.
so like when something hits the interface table, whether it's AR or AP, you use ADFDI to make an adjustment. Well, you have all the columns of data. So you may not get all of your data points entered exactly how you want them. And then you upload it. And now I'm like, oh, I've got the wrong payment method. Or there's some field that we find as critical that, maybe they've never had an error on this type of transaction before, and it's running through ADFDI and it doesn't get loaded correctly. So then there's more manual attention to it now that the transaction's been loaded. So I think with having, say maybe there's 200 columns worth of data, and you've got to be vigilant on knowing exactly what your data points are and how they need to be updated. And it's time consuming, especially when things come through that you haven't seen before and you don't have a process in place for making those adjustments.
Yeah. And just so finicky with respect to the data as well, if you have the date format not quite right, it'll error, and it doesn't give you good error messages on the FBDIs as well when things don't go well. You're kind of digging in to see what went wrong through the log files and things. So that's one thing we found with the cloud and not having any customizations is that we do look for those outside tools that'll help us with that. So like the Morphoapps, we use WalkMe as well, which is kind of a guided learning tool that's been really beneficial to us and to help our users use the new system. Just while they're in the system, it kind of guides them through things like their general tasks that they do. Another one we use is Config Snapshot, which has been helpful as well. That kind of gives you a like it says, a snapshot of your configuration at any given time, so you can kind of troubleshoot things. But all things that aren't able aren't easily able to be seen in Oracle because we don't have access to the databases. We've kind of had to get those, outside tools to help us.
Got it. Okay. Kara,
I
what
think
about your
our
team?
biggest hurdle was the learning curve. We have where our AP department enters the invoice header, and then it's routed out to business unit users all over the place to enter the coding. And so hundreds of people had to learn the new way of doing it, because we were using MarkView before, which was a scanning and workflow coding system, and it was very customized. Our whole system was very customized. It would catch all the little errors that would happen. We didn't have that. And so
Okay.
that really slowed it down. Also, we changed from using Concur for our expense reporting to using Oracle Expenses. So that's a huge change because the functionality isn't the same, the options aren't the same. Concur, is specialized, and Oracle was not at the time, and still is trying to get up to speed. Let's see. I mentioned before we went from Power Plan to Oracle for projects, so that was a change for all of the people who work in the projects arena. The customizations went away, which was terrible. AP, they were used to, in EBS, they could tab from one field to another. Well, because the cloud is mouse based, so you're having to key some, characters, then click on your mouse. So that really slowed them down, and processing speed was just slowed down in general, because on the cloud it's not as fast as it was on-prem. So they had to hire more staffing in the AP arena too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, clicking things through the forms, that seems something we hear a lot, even at more for rep side, is just getting through the forms a lot more time consuming.
And sometimes too, depending on the form, even if you click the right data or you key the right data, it still wants you to select from the list of values.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's dependent, it's form dependent. Like one of the GL inquiry forms, I could key the company code 001. That's our company code for Jack in the Box, and move on to the next field. But it says I didn't enter a company code. I've got to go back and select it from the list.
Yes.
So there's some quirks that, it takes more time to do things that you used to just key, tab. And it's slower.
Yeah, and we noticed that even for the automation. So we do have some RPA automations that, because it is a cloud-based form, they're difficult to do because it's like a service automation. You're never sure when that form's going to be ready to have entry, or when it's going to be available, or which is the next field that you tab through. So those automations are difficult in the cloud as well.
Sure. Yeah. So makes sense. Steph, what other questions? I see a bunch of
We got
stuff
a whole
popping up.
bunch.
Yeah.
We got a whole bunch. So I say that we go through not a power hour, but we're going to power through these, and then we'll get to our closing question. But first off, a question for Kara here. Why did you go to Oracle iExpense from Concur?
A part of it was the cost savings. We were trying to get to be on one system. That's why Power Plan 2, just trying to get everything onto Oracle Cloud. That's really what it came down to. Cost savings and using the system we bought.
And then this might be also for you. I forget who mentioned this. Did you implement another automation tool to replace MarkView?
We're using Oracle's processes. So we used OCR, but now it's IDR. They had an upgrade to an IDR system. That's for the scanning. And then we built all of our workflow rules within Oracle, which previously it was in MarkView.
Yeah, we're just implementing IDR now as well. We had a third party called Inspirus that we were doing the invoices through, but we're starting to move to IDR now as well.
Okay. And IDR does have some limitations, like on multiple pages. I think we get multiple files per invoice. So we may have an actual invoice and then a backup that's in Excel, and that backup doesn't tend to be loaded correctly. So things to consider in your IDR implementation. We're actually planning to go back to Web Center.
OCR.
We had Web Center, yeah, because IDR doesn't meet our needs. So we are going to Web Center, which is also an Oracle tool for scanning. And
I'm
Awesome.
just
Thank
scanning
you.
through the questions. Another one was like, what is the level of customization that's allowed in Oracle Fusion when it comes to finance and supply chain?
So, yes, we really stayed away from all customizations, and the biggest reason around that is that you get quarterly upgrades of the system, whether you want them or not, that you
Mhm.
get a quarterly upgrade. So anytime you do any customization, there's a lot of overhead around testing that customization through every upgrade. We did put in one customization when we first went live because we thought we couldn't live without it, and it did break in the first quarterly upgrade. So we kind of learned our lesson there. We're just kind of staying with the product as it's designed and not doing any customizations. And it's really that overhead around the quarterly testing that you'll have to do for all those customizations.
Yes, quarterly testing will even mess with just normal functionality.
Yes,
So there's enough to
absolutely.
do just with that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, we have 25A going in on Friday night. So we do have automated testing around that, but it's the same for us. It's like the less impact on us for these quarterly updates, the better.
Yeah. And
There's
you're right, because
also monthly updates too for other products like OC,
Right.
EPM, if you
Yeah.
use the financial reporting tools. Those are monthly.
yeah. And you're right, every upgrade, there's new functionality that comes in, but there's also stuff that might break in the old functionality. So I guess that's one thing. Don't underestimate that testing on the quarterly
Yeah.
don't underestimate the testing required on the quarterly updates. We do kind of you have a 2 week window where it goes into your non-prod environment, and then 2 weeks after that, it goes into your prod environment. So you've got about a 2 week window to do the testing on the upgrades. But yeah, they come no matter what.
I have another question for you, and this is not planted. This is actually a real one. Where do you see the most benefits from using more for apps in cloud? And I know all of you use different modules and stuff, but he's running AP projects, fixed assets, etc. So where do you see the most benefits?
Yeah, in all of that. So we use it heavily in projects. It's really helpful for us in projects, changing master data on projects, creating projects, adding tasks to projects. You have a project manager that leaves the company, and now you got to change the project manager on 200 projects. Those kind of master data updates are just so quick and easy. There either isn't a way to do it with an Oracle FPDI, or it's a painful process with the FPDI. So we see a lot of benefits on the project side. And yeah, it's just new functionality all the time that comes in. When we first went live, it didn't have budgeting and forecasting, but now that's there. So we can now load our budgets and forecast with more for apps instead of using the FPDI tool. It's just a lot more user friendly and easier to do is what we find.
Yeah, I think for
Yeah.
us, it's user friendliness and the fact that the business can be self-sufficient when it comes to creating their data imports with more for apps. You know, they get real-time validation of the data, less tickets coming into to the help desk, where that means that we can work on more important things, like things that are broken. And then there's a level of comfort being, an early adopter of more for apps. I think we've been around for, probably just shortly after the company launched. And we have a long tenure with our employees. We have people here over 40 years that are familiar with the tools and really enjoy working with more for apps.
Okay.
For us, it has eliminated the need to do interfacing from we're always in a acquisition and merger mode. And so whenever we get a new company and they have a different financial system, we used to have to build interfaces, and part of their financial system might be a billing system that's not really part of their financial system, a billing system, and they might maintain that. We used to have to build interfaces from that system into the cloud, but now we can just give them the more for apps template for AR, and they can populate that through an extract from their system, and we no longer have to build all those interfaces. It's been life-changing, honestly, hours and hours saved. for master data. Because we have these acquisitions, we have to load all this master data. It used to be on the Oracle implementation team that we did those because the FBDI templates were so finicky and hard to manage. But now we've been able to move that into the business. So the people who are, reviewing the data, they are now able to upload all that data themselves, and they can work the errors because it's so simple. So a huge benefit.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Has
that's
anybody, I saw a question come up around smart forms. Has anybody used smart forms, had any experience with it that you can share with the audience?
we haven't, no.
Okay.
No,
I believe, I'm not going to be very knowledgeable on it, but I believe that we have a smart form on our purchasing side. If anybody had, questions about it, I could link them to the person, to a group that would be able to help them
Okay.
answer some
Excellent.
questions.
All right.
Okay.
Steph?
Yeah, we just have, let me see. So this was a question. So with Fusion, there's no Java-based forms, or is it 100% web browser based? Dennis, do you
100%
know
web
on that?
browser.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just powering through. Did any one of you go with the PAS cloud model in Fusion, or only SA or SAS, PAS or SAS? What is the level and then the customization? So did any of you go PAS cloud or only SAS?
I mean, we're
We're only
SaaS.
SaaS, yeah.
Okay, all right, cool.
We have a PaaS
Um,
environment that we use as part of our customizations, where we keep like document storage for our integrations and whatnot, but it's all SaaS.
Okay, cool. All right, and then I think, since we are running out of time and we want everyone to answer this one, I think we're gonna go to our final closing question. So if you had to go through this again, this whole migration process over to Fusion Cloud, what would you do differently? And take it away, any of you.
Kara?
You're all
wanna
going to
start?
answer it anyway.
Okay, I'll start out. I think staffing has to be considered. The same people who do the implementation of a new system should not also continue to be doing the support for the old system. And that goes for the IT side as well as the business side. It is a full-time job to do both. I mean, we all had full-time jobs before we decided to go to the cloud. And it is a full-time job to get you over to the cloud. So that the staffing needs to be considered. And that really wasn't done in our company. Also, expectation setting. It is not going to be perfect. It is not going to run smoothly. And I think that we all anticipate it's going to go much more smoothly than it did. So we weren't able to process invoices quickly enough. So that was a bog down, and it's all hands on deck. So it's really trying to navigate, where do we put the people? Where do we put, all this troubleshooting? And so I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Thank you, Kara. Denise, you want to take it next?
Sure. I mean, I agree with Kara on the staffing. We were fortunate, at least from the IT perspective, that our EBS environment was very stable. We've been on it for a long time, weren't making very many changes. So, I could focus primarily on going to the Fusion Cloud. But the business was really strapped. I mean, we have people who, like Kara says, full-time jobs, like the AR manager, the GL manager, who also are having to sit in hours and hours of meetings with consultants, trying to, get them up to speed on how we do business. So it's a strain. It takes a long time. It's hard work. And I thought that the go live was very smooth. Like everything worked day one, like things were happening, like stuff was, we didn't have any major failures, but the fact that it slowed the business down dramatically wasn't taken into consideration. Like we're still playing catch up 10, 11 months later. We still have, we're just finding now that, invoices that are like still in the system that haven't been paid for months, that, either the supplier's not complaining about, or, the workflow's off in la la land. So it's just those first couple months post go live, you're going to want to ramp up your staff. And I'm not sure that management always anticipates that. They think that there's going to be this huge time saving when you have a new system and it's more efficient. And no, that's not the case. And the support staff as well. You know, we went from 2 to now we have 5. You know, if you do customizations, you're going to use Oracle Integration Cloud most likely. And that is different. It's completely different than creating a PL/SQL package. And, you know, it's this full GUI environment where you have to create all these steps. And it's a completely new skill set that your existing, you know, Oracle developer may not have. So you're going to want to have staff for that as well. And then from the data perspective, I would say that using, you know, tools like Amorph Wraps from the get-go, instead of, you know, kind of shying away from it. We had to like, we kind of limped along, like we limped into AP and then to AR and procurement and projects. But, you know, once everyone got familiar with it, with the new versions, I think they were off and running. So
I'd like to add one thing. We had a dashboard after go live that tracked when we were considered stable across all the modules, and it would be reported across modules. It took us 2 years for the last module to be considered stable. So it's not an overnight thing.
Right. Expectations. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Derek, want to
Yeah.
round it out?
Yeah, sure. I would just echo like the importance of having that project properly staffed. And that's one thing we actually did well. Traditionally, we don't do that well. We have people doing it kind of off the side of their desks. But this time we did have a dedicated team. We backbilled for them. And so this was 100% their focus, which I think was the key to making this a successful project. And then that team actually rolled on after go live. They rolled over to be the support team for the system as well. So our model of supporting it is that team that did the implementation is also now the team that supports it from a functional perspective for the business. So
Oh, nice.
that worked well that we could dedicate those people to do that. I think that was a real win for us from making that a success. Other lessons, I think integrations, I think don't underestimate the pain of integrations into the new system. If you have a choice between like like Kara mentioned, where they kind of went away from some of those third party and into Oracle solutions. We didn't do that with our time card. At the time we went live, Oracle Time and Labor didn't really have the functionality that we were looking for. So we did go with a third party time card. But you pay for that then every month after that or every day after that with the integrations between the two systems. So I think if there's an Oracle product or like a consolidated product that kind of meets most of your requirements, I wouldn't go to a third party to get that last 10% of your requirements, because that integration is going to be painful for the life of having that system in place. And it's just the timing to go live. We did mid-year, we went live in October. It did make year-end challenging that year because we were really reporting under 2 systems and trying to balance 2 systems. So if you do have the opportunity to kind of time it with your year-end, it might be beneficial to kind of finish a year-end in your old system and then start a new year in the new system.
Sure. Okay, makes sense. Steph, I know we're running up on time. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you to Derek, Denise, and Kara again for joining us today and taking the time out of their busy schedules to provide a lot of informative answers. I know that we still have a lot of questions in here. If you have any other ones, fill them in. We will definitely get back to them after this. But yeah, thank you so much again. And as always, everyone will get the recording for this by tomorrow. Probably some bullets that were suggested of the key points discussed. I think that's a great idea. So just keep an eye out for that. Dennis, do you have anything else to say?
Just again, repeat what you said around thanking Derek and Denise and Kara. It was grateful to have you guys taking time out of your busy day and appreciate it gratefully.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.